Joining us right now is former Deputy Assistant Director of the Counterterror Division of the FBI, Turchie. Terry, good to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us this morning. Your reaction to Comey's firing?
Well, I think all of this was really set in motion, as so many people have talked about last July when he decided to come out and tell the whole world that essentially he was going to pass on doing anything with Hillary Clinton. And I think at that point, even in the FBI, there were a lot of scratching heads and a lot of people wondering what all this was about. And quite frankly, I think he missed the decision. The decision was essentially very simple. Refer all of this to the Department of Justice and let them make a decision. But for some reason, he decided to go ahead and do what he did. But I really think that is what this is all about. I don't think this involves the discussion of Russian collusion. I don't think this involves anything nefarious. I think it involves that and the fact that in the Department of Justice, we all know that the FBI is subordinate to the Attorney General and that the FBI Director has to answer to the Attorney General. So when you go by the rules are pretty clear on anybody doing a press conference or anything else, and they apply to everybody, and that is you have to get the permission from the Department of Justice to do these kinds of things. And he just kind of went off on his own, and I just think people never quite understood that. I didn't quite understand that. At the same time, I think we have to remember that he served his country well for many years, and so this is one of those things that is Washington, D.C.-ish, and that's why I'm glad I live in San Francisco now. It's just one of those things. I think he made the wrong call, and it all caught up with him, and I don't think it reflects on the White House or all of these other things that you're hearing.
Yeah, but Dagan, the timing of it is being questioned today. Much of the media is asking if this is related to the Russia probe.
Right, and senators, too, from both sides of the aisle. We heard from Senator Chuck Schumer, who, you know, in the fall was no fan of Jim Comey. Senator Schumer talking about the timing of it, but also Senator Richard Burr. His opinion is critical because he's the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Mark Warner, the minority leader on that panel, also concerned about the timing. But there might be some explanation as to the why now. You have Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who was just sworn in last month, and it was critical for him to step in. He was seen as a very non-political figure to look into Jim Comey and his handling of the email investigation, and it was a report from him that was released yesterday. And Rosenstein said Comey's actions at that news conference that Terry was talking about last summer badly damaged the FBI's reputation. The Bureau is not likely to regain the trust of the American people or Congress until it has a director who understands the gravity of the mistakes. So this is critically important. Again, it always goes to something you brought up early on. These people who work in the Trump administration, these roles have not been filled, and so it was only within the last several weeks that Rod Rosenstein, the deputy AG, has stepped into his role, and so that might explain the why now.
What do you think, Terry? You agree with that?
Well, I do. I think that you have to remember that they probably began an inquiry last year, sometime after the July press conference, about what he did. And it sometimes takes many months to have those get completed. And so now you have a confluence of everything coming together. You have new people at the Department of Justice. You have new decision makers. You have kind of the inquiry done. You probably had, I'm sure Director Comey has talked to people over there about his decision and has said similar things than to what he told Congress. So people are finally having to make a decision, and they're probably thinking, look, it seems like he would probably do this the same all over again. And at some point, you have to just decide what you're going to do and move on. And I think they decided that it's time to do this because the FBI is internally is probably being affected by what he did and some of these other things that happened. For example, I think a lot of people I've talked to since last year have expressed just amazement at the way the interview of Hillary Clinton was put together. That's another problem, and that's actually bigger in a lot of ways than the press conference, because when you start telling FBI agents how to do interviews, and when you hear stories that make it sound like there were more people in there with the Hillary Clinton team than there were FBI agents doing the interview, which was probably 2. then there's some real issues that you have to scratch your head about again, because none of the rest of us would be treated like that. That is not the way FBI interviews happen.
Right.
You don't have the subject come in and sit elevated in a chair wearing a crown. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. She
and,
basically
it's just kind of the feeling that you get.
She said, if it's recorded, I'm not coming. It's not going to be recorded. I'll come, but you know, I don't want Jim Comey to do the interview. He had deputies do it, and then again, it wasn't recorded, which was extraordinary, actually. I wonder if this firing, Michael Jones, will mean that the leaks stop.
You know, I think it's probably too much to think that Comey is the source of all of the leaks. Remember, there are a lot of...
But did he stop them? I mean, there's a culture, and it starts at the top.
It's a good point. I still think, though, that probably the leaks are, as much as anything, there's so many competing power centers in the White House. They all have different motivations to potentially leak. So I'm not sure that, you know, and is the FBI really going to be focused that much on, you know, leaking, especially in some of the reforms post Watergate? I really think the question I have is, if I were in the White House, I would be focused a lot less on the press conference in July, and I'd be focused an awful lot more on how he handled the reopening of the investigation in October. I thought, you know, it was...
With the Anthony Weiner laptop and all that.
Exactly. Because, I mean, you know, we all have to acknowledge that was in Trump's favor, but I thought that was even more clumsily handled, and it really showed a kind of lack of awareness of the political sensitivity of the FBI director role.
Yeah. In fact, just last week when he testified, he said that that Uma Abedin had transferred hundreds of thousands of emails to Anthony Weiner's laptop, and then later we found out that it wasn't hundreds of thousands of emails at all.
They had to basically amend his testimony.
So what's going on?
Well, the Wall Street Journal does have an incredible story that they reported that's also on the front page, that there was a growing frustration within the White House that Jim Comey wouldn't step up and say point blank, just very firmly, there are no ties in terms of the Trump administration and the campaign and Russia. And they felt like, these are my words, that he was a show pony who was showing up in front of the TV cameras a little too much. Now, the White House is saying that President Trump relied on the recommendations of Attorney General Jeff Sessions and the Deputy AG, who I mentioned, Rod Rosenstein, in terms of this firing. If there are going to be leaks out of the FBI, it's going to be a leak saying that President Trump ordered it. That's my speculation, just to be clear about that.
Terry, it's all really good points that you made, and obviously what Dagan and the panel is making right now. But the truth is we don't have any evidence of any collusion between Trump and the Russians. But this investigation keeps going on. My question is, how much is this costing, all of these hearings and this investigation, where we keep coming up with nothing? But in any event, that's another conversation, Terry. It's good to have you on the program this morning, sir.
Thank you, Maria.
Terry Turchie joining us there.